Tell us what was the tipping point? What essentially made the decision more solid to include Saudi Arabia as an emerging market in this index?
Yeah, it's been a gradual process. I mean, we started working with the Saudi authorities back in September 2015. They introduced what's called a QFII system for foreign investors, where they could invest directly into the market in June 2015. So we opened up discussions back in September. So it's taken several years really to get to this stage, but there's been a lot of engagement, not just changes in the market structure, but also huge amounts of engagement with some of the largest global investors to make sure everyone's ready and everyone accepts that now's the right time to include this very large market.
And why is now the right time?
I think you've got a market where the infrastructure is well developed. You've got a market where there's a lot of interest from international investors. This becomes, I mean, this is the biggest market in the Middle East. We've recently announced we're adding Kuwait. So adding the Saudi market now, I think gives a much greater exposure to the Middle East. And investors are showing a real interest in this region.
Did the Saudi Aramco IPO play at all into into this decision?
It didn't play into the decision, but I think it's an indication of the importance and size of some of the opportunity that exists in the Middle East, and not just Saudi Aramco, but other IPOs that you would expect in Saudi will mean that this market will become a very sizable emerging market, and probably one of the biggest emerging markets within a small number of years.
Mark, we've been talking about with the Tadawul CEO as well of the stock exchange, talking about the geopolitical concerns, the oil prices, and the sharp swings that we do see. I mean, those are pretty much fair game for the Saudi market overall. And before, the foreign selling was quite limited, given the fact that the ownership was so low. Now that we're seeing potentially billions of dollars of international inflows coming to this market, does it magnify the downside risk?
I'm not sure that it's so much the downside risk, because I think you're right about Aramco would bring in a greater exposure to oil. But for global investors, they're looking across the market. So they're looking across emerging markets. And I think the Saudi Arabian market offers an opportunity for diversification. So I'm not sure the downside risks are as great. I think it offers a lot of opportunity. I think it's a market which we've seen something like a 10% growth in the last year. So it's a market, I think, that will continue to grow. We'll see increasing number of IPOs, and I think international investors are very keen. It will add a lot of diversity to their emerging market portfolios.